The morning sun spilled through the towering windows of Crestwood Academy, casting sharp beams across the polished marble floors like golden blades slicing through the silence. Every inch of the campus exuded a kind of old-money prestige, the kind that whispered rather than shouted, where ancient oak trees lined the immaculate driveways and the air always carried the faint scent of manicured roses. The sprawling main building, with its ivy-clad stone facade and Gothic arches, stood as a monument to generations of privilege and power. Emily Carter paused at the entrance, her reflection briefly flickering across the glass doors. At 28, she was younger than most faculty, but her back was straight and her jaw set with determination. She adjusted the strap of her leather satchel, feeling the reassuring weight of her freshly printed lesson plans and the compact body camera clipped discreetly to her lanyard. Her tailored black dress hugged her figure professionally, paired with modest heels that clicked confidently against the marble as she stepped inside. This was not where she had expected to be when she left her pharmaceutical research job, but Crestwood represented a chance to shape young minds at the highest level. She believed, perhaps naively, that passion and integrity would prevail here. The grand hall bustled with students in crisp blazers embroidered with the gold crest of the academy. They moved like flocks of young aristocrats, their laughter light, their conversations peppered with plans for yacht club weekends and European vacations. Their world was one of legacy admissions, private tutors, and futures already written in polished family portfolios. Yet beneath the tailored uniforms and polished smiles, Emily sensed the undercurrents of entitlement that pulsed like an invisible current through these marble halls. As she walked toward her chemistry lab, the opulence of Crestwood never ceased to remind her of the chasm between her modest Hartford apartment and the sprawling estates these students called home. The corridors were wide, lined with dark oak paneling and oil portraits of alumni whose surnames echoed through political offices, corporate boardrooms, and philanthropic foundations. Emily greeted the few early arriving colleagues with polite nods, their brief acknowledgments betraying a silent hierarchy that placed her, the newcomer, at its cautious edges. Her classroom awaited at the far end of the science wing, isolated from the main bustle, its heavy oak door opening with a soft creak that punctuated the morning stillness. Rows of gleaming lab tables reflected the sterile fluorescent light, while racks of glassware stood like soldiers awaiting inspection. The faint scent of chemicals mingled with the cleaner's citrus polish. Emily exhaled, allowing herself a moment of quiet focus. She arranged beakers and test tubes with meticulous care, aligning them precisely for the day's lesson on molecular bonds. Her fingers brushed against the laminated periodic table as she checked that every station was prepared. The silence was suddenly interrupted by footsteps. They were deliberate, too heavy, and measured to belong to a student who had simply arrived early. Emily's pulse quickened. She turned, her eyes scanning the empty hallway visible through the tall glass window beside the door. Nothing. The footsteps halted. The empty corridor stared back at her like an indifferent witness. For a moment, only the hum of the ventilation system filled the void. She whispered softly under her breath, steadying herself. Just nerves. Paranoia, perhaps. Yet instinctively, she touched the body camera, ensuring the tiny indicator light glowed steadily. Precaution, not fear. The recent incidents had taught her caution was survival. 3 weeks earlier, Ryan Caldwell had crossed a line most students would not dare approach. She had caught him red-handed during an AP chemistry exam, his phone held low, the camera capturing her carefully constructed questions. The rules were unambiguous. Cheating warranted an automatic fail, but Ryan was not just any student. He was the son of Senator Caldwell, whose influence stretched far beyond the gated confines of Crestwood. His mother managed hedge funds that controlled billions. His acceptance into Ivy League institutions had been secured long before his first SAT practice test. In his world, rules were obstacles easily brushed aside by money and power. The confrontation had been swift. Emily had reported the violation immediately, submitting the confiscated phone as evidence. That afternoon, she had been summoned to Principal Whitmore's office, a space heavy with the scent of old leather and even older compromises. The principal's silver mustache twitched as he closed the mahogany door behind her. "Miss Carter, perhaps we can explore alternative resolutions for the Caldwell matter." His tone had been both condescending and cautious, the voice of a man who had navigated these waters many times before. Emily had straightened her back in the stiff leather chair, her Yale credentials framed on the office wall behind her seeming suddenly insignificant beneath the weight of legacy donations. He was photographing the exam. 5 students witnessed it. Her voice was firm. The principal's sigh was long and rehearsed. The Caldwell family has contributed significantly to our endowment, over $3 million. Surely we can find a more nuanced solution. Emily had refused. The grade stands. He can retake the course next semester. That decision, made with clear conscience, had sealed her fate. The retaliation was subtle at first. Her tires slashed in the faculty lot, security cameras conveniently malfunctioning. Anonymous reviews appeared online accusing her of incompetence and bias. Someone changed her password, locking her out of the grading system for 2 days. The administration expressed sympathy but offered no solutions. After the third incident, Emily had purchased the body camera, a simple device, no larger than a car key, purchased out of pocket. Officially, the Academy discouraged such recordings, though no explicit policy forbade them. After all, the administration preferred problems resolved quietly, without evidence. The footsteps in the hallway resumed, closer now. Emily's heart raced as she forced herself to continue arranging the final set of beakers. The door remained closed. First period arrived uneventfully, her freshman class entering with the wide-eyed enthusiasm of students not yet jaded by Crestwood's toxic undercurrents. Their questions were genuine, their curiosity intact. She relished these moments. Teaching still mattered here, for some. It was during third period that the shift occurred. The app chemistry seniors filed in, their movements slower, more calculated. Ryan Caldwell entered last, flanked by Ethan Zhao and Dylan Parker. They settled into the back row, their lacrosse gear piled carelessly beside them, an open display of disregard for the rules. Today we review oxidation reduction reactions, Emily announced, distributing worksheets. This will reflect what you can expect on Friday's exam. Another test? Ryan's voice carried a note of mocking exasperation, designed not to question but to challenge her authority in front of the class. The schedule was in the syllabus from day one. Emily replied evenly, refusing to engage. Yeah, well, things change. Ryan drawled, leaning back, his chair creaking under his athletic frame. My father says teachers who don't adapt don't last long at Crestwood. The room's energy thickened as the other students fell silent, their eyes darting between teacher and provocateur. Emily continued handing out papers, her fingers steady, despite the tension crawling along her spine. Everyone, please begin working on problems 1 through 10. I will circulate to check your progress. She moved deliberately, walking row by row. When she reached the middle of the classroom, Ryan stood abruptly. I need to use the bathroom. Please take the hall pass, Emily responded without missing a beat. I don't need a pass, Ryan said, voice rising, turning toward the door. Ethan and Dylan followed without hesitation. Trevor, you need permission, Emily began. But Ryan cut her off with a chilling smile. What I need is for you to learn your place. His voice was soft, yet its menace was unmistakable. The door closed behind them with a soft thud. For a moment, the room held its breath. Emily stood frozen, her mind racing through protocol, through every useless meeting where administrative platitudes had been offered in place of action. She made a decision. Everyone, continue your work. I'll return shortly. She stepped into the hallway, intending to report the incident to the main office. The science wing stretched ahead, unusually silent. Midway down the corridor, footsteps approached from behind. Quick. Intentional. Miss Carter, Ryan's voice echoed, drawing her to a halt. She turned slowly. Ethan and Dylan blocked her retreat. Ryan closed the distance, his 6'3" frame towering over her. We need to talk. Gentlemen, return to class immediately, Emily commanded, her voice firm despite the tremor rising in her chest. Or what? Ryan smirked, stepping closer. You'll fail us? Call our parents? You don't seem to understand how this works. He reached into his pocket. For a fleeting second, Emily feared a gun. Instead, he produced a slim razor blade, the kind used for precision cutting in art class. The polished metal glinted under the fluorescent lights, its edge catching every tremor of her breath. You think your little degree matters here? My father could buy and sell you 100 times over. You dared to fail me. That threatens my Princeton admission. Ryan's voice was smooth, controlled, every word dripping with entitlement. Your grades reflect your performance, Emily replied, forcing steel into her tone. Ryan's grin widened. Shut up. His voice cracked into a snarl as the blade slashed downward, slicing through the fabric of her dress from hip to thigh with surgical precision. The material fell open, exposing the slip beneath. Emily gasped, stumbling back, one hand clutching the torn fabric. The cut was deliberate, controlled. the product of either practice or premeditation. "Oops," Ryan whispered mockingly. "Guess you'll need a new dress. Maybe something from Walmart would suit you better." Ethan laughed, his voice sharp and cruel. "Leave me alone," Emily whispered, her throat dry, panic crawling under her skin. "Not yet." Ryan stepped closer. "Today you will walk into Whitmore's office, apologize for your mistake, and resign. Or next time it won't just be your clothes." Emily's mind screamed, but outwardly, she held her ground. "This is assault," she said clearly, her words punctuated by the steady blink of the body camera. "You are holding me against my will." Ryan's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Are you threatening us?" "I am stating facts." The blade rose again, this time slicing through her sleeve without breaking skin. The message was unmistakable. Bradley pulled out his phone, recording the encounter. "Say it. Say you'll resign." Emily's breath quickened. She calculated the risk, the options, the narrowing chances of escape. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, she snatched a beaker from a nearby cart and hurled it at the tall laboratory window. Glass exploded outward with a deafening crash. "Help!" Her scream shattered the heavy silence, echoing through the corridors. "Help me!" Trevor lunged as Ethan tried to cover her mouth. She bit hard, drawing blood, her teeth clamping down with feral desperation. Another scream tore free. She kicked and twisted, every muscle fueled by raw survival instinct. They wrestled her into the empty lab where the nightmare had begun 3 weeks earlier. The heavy door slammed shut, the lock clicking into place. The heavy oak door of the chemistry lab closed behind them with a dull thud that seemed to trap not only Emily's body but the very air itself. The sterile scent of cleaning agents and faint chemical residue clung to the room, mixing with the metallic tang of fear rising in her throat. The bright overhead lights reflected off the polished black countertops and glimmering glass beakers, turning the laboratory into a sterile theater for their twisted performance. Ryan advanced slowly, the razor blade still glinting in his hand like a surgeon's scalpel, precise and purposeful. Behind him, Ethan and Dylan flanked her like trained sentries, their faces cold and resolute, betraying no hesitation, as though this had all been carefully rehearsed. "Check her pockets," Ryan commanded, his voice low but authoritative, each word cutting through the tense air like a blade. Ethan lunged forward, grabbing her purse from her shoulder with rough force, spilling its contents across the black lab table. Pens clattered and rolled like tiny missiles. Papers fluttered to the floor like wounded birds. Her phone slid across the table's surface and stopped abruptly near Dylan's hand. Dylan snatched it up immediately. "Password," he demanded, his eyes narrowing, his voice vibrating with the same entitled impatience that characterized them all. Emily stood frozen for a fraction of a second, weighing the impossible choices. The blade hovered dangerously close to her neck, its cold edge lightly brushing her skin. The sensation was electric and immediate, a chilling reminder of the stakes. "Password," Ryan repeated, his voice dropping lower, now vibrating with menace. Survival eclipsed pride. Emily recited the password through clenched teeth, every syllable feeling like a betrayal of her own resolve. Dylan began scrolling through her phone with cold efficiency. He deleted messages, emails, contacts, any thread that could be woven into evidence against them. Every tap of his finger erased pieces of her armor, stripping her bare in the face of their orchestrated assault. "See? No proof now," Ethan said with smug satisfaction. "Your word against ours." Ryan's lips curled into a condescending smirk. "It's over, Miss Carter. You can still walk away with a severance package if you resign quietly. Otherwise, things will get much worse." Emily's eyes darted to the body camera clipped to her lanyard. The silent witness had captured every word, every threat, every calculated movement, but they hadn't noticed it yet. She weighed her next action carefully. Ryan stepped closer, his breath warm and sharp with expensive cologne and pre-workout supplements. His shadow swallowed her as the blade pressed against her throat again, not cutting but threatening with its frigid steel kiss. "Say it," he whispered. "Say you'll resign." Instead of answering, Emily made her move. In one fluid motion, she grabbed another beaker from the edge of the table and hurled it against the adjacent window. The beaker shattered upon impact, sending shards of glass spraying outward like a fountain of jagged light. The sound was deafening in the confined space. "Help!" she screamed at the top of her lungs. "Help me!" Her voice reverberated through the empty corridors, a desperate siren call for anyone who might be within earshot. Ryan cursed loudly, his arrogance momentarily cracked by panic. Ethan rushed forward, trying to clamp his hand over her mouth. Emily bit down savagely, tasting the metallic burst of his blood. Dylan grabbed her arm, twisting it painfully behind her back, but she thrashed violently, her heels scraping against the linoleum floor. "Shut her up!" Ryan barked, his voice climbing an octave as their orchestrated intimidation spiraled into chaos. They were no longer composed predators, but frantic boys desperate to regain control. They dragged her deeper into the room, their strength overwhelming despite her furious resistance. They pinned her against one of the large lab tables, the cool surface biting against her exposed skin where the fabric had been slashed. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she struggled to keep her voice steady. The body camera still blinked silently at her chest, its red light recording every horrific second. Ethan's hand throbbed where her teeth had broken skin. Dylan's grip on her bruised arm tightened mercilessly. Ryan's face hovered inches from hers, his once cocky facade twisted into a mask of frustration and hatred. "We were going to let you walk away," he hissed, "but you just had to make it worse for yourself." "Check for other recordings," Ryan ordered. Dylan ripped the lanyard from her neck, finally noticing the camera. His eyes widened briefly. "She's recording," Dylan stammered, the color draining from his face. Ryan's expression shifted from anger to calculation in an instant. "Get it," he barked. Emily jerked her body backward, slamming into the tall metal shelving behind her. Glass bottles rattled dangerously. "You destroy that and the footage is already saved," she bluffed with boldness she did not fully feel. "This camera streams to cloud storage. Destroying it changes nothing." The lie hung heavy in the room. The truth was, her basic camera had no live streaming capability, but they didn't need to know that. Ethan grabbed Ryan's arm, his voice urgent. "Dude, we need to go. Someone is coming." Faint voices and hurried footsteps echoed from the distant corridor, growing louder by the second. Ryan's breathing quickened, his eyes darting nervously toward the shattered window. "This isn't over," he growled. "You think you've won, Miss Carter? My family will ruin you. You'll be lucky to teach preschool when we're finished." Emily stared directly into his eyes, drawing on reserves of defiance she had not known she possessed. "Maybe," she said softly, "but you'll be in prison. How will that look on your Princeton application?" The heavy door burst open behind them. It was not campus security as they had expected, but Sarah Newen and two other faculty members, their faces pale with shock. "Oh my God," Sarah gasped, as her eyes absorbed the horrifying tableau before her. Emily's torn dress, the scattered contents of her purse, the blood on Ethan's hand, the blade still glinting in Ryan's grip. "She attacked us," Ryan blurted without missing a beat, his practiced privilege launching him into full defense mode. "We were only trying to talk about our grades. She went crazy." Emily pointed directly to the body camera, now resting on the table. "It's all recorded. Every second." The room erupted into immediate chaos. Sarah rushed to Emily's side while the other teachers quickly separated the boys, their hands shaking, their faces a mixture of horror and disbelief. Campus security arrived within minutes, their expressions shifting from confusion to alarm as the gravity of the situation became clear. Then the local police arrived, initially hesitant, their demeanor colored by the realization that they were now entangled in a politically explosive scandal. Emily stood her ground. "I want to press full charges," she said firmly, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "Assault with a deadly weapon, false imprisonment, destruction of property, attempted destruction of evidence, and it's all on video." The officers exchanged wary glances, realizing the severity of the accusations. One of them made a call, speaking in hushed tones. Emily heard fragments. "Senator's son, knife, video evidence." The response was swift. Within the hour, a SWAT van rolled up to the manicured front entrance of Crestwood Academy. Officers in tactical gear stormed through the grand marble hallways, their heavy boots echoing off the stone floors like drums of impending judgment. Students crowded the windows of their classrooms, smartphones raised to capture the surreal scene. The sons of the elite were being led out in handcuffs. Ryan Caldwell, still wearing the smug remnants of his arrogance, tried one last time to weaponize his father's power. "My father will have your badges," he threatened, his voice dripping with entitlement as he was read his Miranda rights. One officer stared him down calmly. "Your father can take it up with the district attorney." The officers led the three boys past Emily. Ryan shot her a final venomous glare. "You'll regret this," he spat. Emily met his eyes without blinking. "No," she replied with quiet strength. "I don't think I will." As the SWAT van's doors slammed shut and the crowd outside erupted into a frenzy of camera flashes and shouted questions, Emily felt the oppressive weight that had been bearing down on her finally shift. She stood taller. She had faced the predators. She had refused to be silenced. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The flashing red and blue lights bathed Crestwood Academy's grand entrance in pulsating color, their rhythmic strobes slicing through the crisp Connecticut evening like warnings to anyone still daring to believe in invincibility. Outside the iron gates, a growing sea of news vans parked bumper to bumper, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like mechanical sentinels. Reporters huddled under bright spotlights, rehearsing sound bites while cameras rolled, hungry to capture every development in the unfolding scandal. The phrase "privileged students attack teacher" had already become a national headline before the sun fully set. Inside the Academy's marble-clad boardroom, however, the real war was just beginning. Emily Carter sat at the long-polished table beneath the watchful gaze of oil-painted former headmasters whose stern faces seemed to silently judge the proceedings. Beside her sat Olivia Ramirez, the lawyer who had agreed to represent her pro bono. Olivia's sharp eyes scanned the room like a hawk, her posture radiating unshakable confidence honed from years spent dismantling systemic corruption. At the opposite end of the table, Senator Caldwell exuded power from every pore, his tailored navy suit pristine, his silver hair immaculate under the recessed lighting. The senator's cold gaze locked onto Emily with a calculated intensity, as if willing her to break under its weight. "This is a witch hunt," he declared, his voice carrying easily across the chamber, its tone perfectly calibrated for both intimidation and public consumption. "My son is being crucified over a simple misunderstanding between a teacher and her students." Olivia's voice was cool and precise as she countered. "Your son held a blade to my client's throat." "That is not a misunderstanding, Senator. That is felony assault." Allegedly, Caldwell's lead attorney interjected, his tone oily and dismissive. "The footage is ambiguous. It could easily be interpreted as a heated argument, nothing more." "Shall we play the footage for the board?" Olivia suggested, her finger hovering over the tablet resting on the table. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, most of them having already seen the damning recording multiple times. The image of Ryan Caldwell pressing a razor blade against Emily's exposed neck, flanked by his accomplices, left little room for alternate interpretation. Principal Jonathan Whitmore cleared his throat, attempting to insert himself as the voice of reason. Perhaps a compromise could be reached. The boys could be suspended for the remainder of the semester, complete community service, and receive counseling. "This is no longer a school disciplinary matter," Olivia cut him off firmly. "Criminal charges have been filed. These are adult felonies we are discussing." Because this teacher escalated the situation, Senator Caldwell snapped, his carefully maintained facade cracking for the first time. She could have handled this quietly, within the school's established processes. Instead, she chose to involve law enforcement, turning a minor conflict into a media circus. Emily finally spoke, her voice steady and sharp. "I defended myself against 3 grown young men who conspired to intimidate, assault, and silence me. Your son believed his wealth excused criminal behavior. I simply refused to submit." The room erupted instantly. Some parents shouted in support, their voices filled with years of suppressed frustration. Others defended the boys, their anger boiling over into indignant cries about ruining bright futures over youthful mistakes. The board members banged their gavels and called for order, but the auditorium swirled in chaos, the divisions within Crestwood finally exposed for all to see. "You have no idea what you've done," Senator Caldwell said quietly, his words slicing through the commotion, his eyes burning with cold fury. "You've declared war on the wrong family." "No," Emily replied, rising to her feet and meeting his gaze without flinching. "Your son declared war on decency. I just refused to surrender." The days that followed became a relentless media storm. National news anchors debated the case nightly, turning Emily Carter into an unwilling symbol of resistance against privilege. Her face appeared on magazine covers and primetime specials. Teachers from across the country flooded her inbox with messages of solidarity. A GoFundMe campaign for her legal defense exploded overnight, raising over $200,000 in 48 hours. But the backlash arrived just as swiftly. Anonymous threats filled her email. Her apartment building's security footage was mysteriously corrupted. Someone leaked her academic records, scouring for any hint of scandal. They found nothing but spotless achievement, which only fueled the resentment from those desperate to discredit her. Ryan Caldwell, Ethan Zhao, and Dylan Parker were released on $500,000 bail each, a trivial expense for their families. They returned home with ankle monitors locked around their legs, their access to Crestwood revoked pending trial. The image of Ryan wearing his Princeton hoodie while officers fitted him with the bracelet instantly became an online meme, the phrase "rich boy justice" trending for days. The first fracture in their unity came quietly. After a week of mounting pressure, Dylan Parker's lawyer approached Olivia with an offer. Dylan would testify against the others in exchange for reduced charges. He claims Ryan was the ringleader, Olivia explained during a tense strategy meeting. He says this wasn't the first time they targeted a teacher, just the first time someone fought back. "Take the deal," Emily said, without hesitation. "I want the truth out." Dylan's deposition was damning. He painted a detailed picture of years-long abuse of power, teachers threatened, grades altered, complaints buried under administrative pressure. He presented text messages where Ryan bragged about getting Mr. Peterson fired, where Ethan joked about slashing Emily's tires. "We thought we were untouchable," Dylan confessed, his voice cracking under the weight of his own guilt. "Our parents always fixed everything." The revelations triggered a full-blown investigation into Crestwood's internal practices. Suddenly, every mysteriously adjusted grade was audited. Every teacher who had abruptly resigned was interviewed. The depth of corruption was staggering. Principal Whitmore resigned within weeks, citing personal reasons, though whispers of financial incentives soon surfaced. 3 board members followed, exposed for accepting undisclosed donations to overlook academic misconduct. But the most anticipated event loomed ahead: the trial. On a gray November morning, the courtroom brimmed with reporters, students, and parents. Emily sat at the witness stand beneath the harsh overhead lights, her composure unwavering despite the cameras capturing her every breath. Across the room, Ryan and Ethan sat at the defense table, their postures stiff, their once arrogant faces pale and hollowed by fear. "Miss Carter," the prosecutor began, "please describe what occurred on the morning of October 15th. Emily recounted the events in meticulous detail, her voice unwavering as she described each terrifying moment. When the body camera footage played, several jurors gasped audibly at the sight of Ryan brandishing the razor blade. The defense launched their counterattack with aggressive precision. They questioned her teaching methods, implied she had antagonized the boys, suggested she had somehow manipulated the footage. "Isn't it true you failed Ryan out of personal bias?" the defense attorney pressed. "I failed him because he cheated on an exam," Emily replied. "I have photographic evidence of him taking pictures of the test. You could have given him a second chance." "I could have," she answered calmly, "but that would have been unfair to every student who studied honestly. My job is to educate and evaluate fairly, not bend rules for those who believe they are above them." When Ryan took the stand, his testimony was a masterclass in deflection. He claimed Emily had been aggressive toward him, that he felt threatened by her authority, that the blade was for self-defense. Self-defense against a teacher half your size? The prosecutor asked incredulously. "She was hostile," Ryan insisted, but his carefully constructed narrative crumbled under cross-examination. The text messages Dylan provided revealed meticulous planning, intent to harm, and a disturbing pattern of behavior. On the second day of testimony, Ethan Zhao broke under pressure, accepting a deal for leniency. His confession added further damning details: a group chat where they plotted how to plant drugs in Emily's car, secretly taken photographs of her without consent, and mockery over how easily administrators could be manipulated. "We never thought she'd fight back," Ethan admitted, staring at the floor. "Teachers always just gave in." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Assault with a deadly weapon, false imprisonment, conspiracy to commit harm. Ryan's face drained of all color as the verdict was read, his father's influence finally collapsing beneath the weight of undeniable evidence. The sentencing made national headlines. Ryan Caldwell received 5 years in federal prison. Ethan Zhao was sentenced to 3 years. Dylan Parker, who cooperated fully, received probation and extensive community service. Senator Caldwell held one final press conference, denouncing the verdict as a miscarriage of justice. But when reporters asked if he had reviewed the full evidence, his spokesman abruptly ended the session. Within a month, Senator Caldwell quietly announced he would not seek re-election. His once formidable political dynasty crumbled under the scandal, and his wife's high society connections evaporated almost overnight. Their estate was sold to cover mounting legal fees and civil settlements. As the courtroom emptied, Emily stepped out into the cool autumn air, her breath forming soft white clouds against the fading light. The media still waited, hungry for her statement. She offered none. She had already said everything that mattered where it counted most. The battle inside Crestwood Academy was won, but the war for true accountability in education had only begun. The transformation of Crestwood Academy did not happen overnight, but its momentum was undeniable. The scandal that had once threatened to consume Emily Carter now served as the catalyst for a sweeping institutional reckoning. The old order that had for decades protected the privileged few began to crumble under the weight of public scrutiny and internal upheaval. The grand iron gates no longer symbolized untouchable power, but stood as silent sentinels to the changes surging within. In the weeks following the trial, Crestwood's Board of Trustees announced the appointment of Dr. Carmen Hughes as the new principal. Her arrival was swift and deliberate, marked by a press conference held beneath the towering stone archways of the Academy's front courtyard. Dr. Hevertenifreesticsteasist. Hughes carried herself with quiet authority. Her dark suit was impeccably tailored, her voice calm but firm as she faced the gathered press. No student should ever feel empowered to threaten a teacher. No teacher should ever feel pressured to compromise their integrity. That ends today. Her words reverberated through the courtyard, signaling the end of Crestwood's era of silent compliance. The first reforms came quickly. Mandatory body cameras were issued to every faculty member. Small, discreet devices that clipped neatly to lanyards and blazers, their blinking lights a constant, silent reminder that transparency now governed every interaction. An anonymous reporting system was launched, allowing students and staff to submit concerns without fear of retaliation. A new disciplinary review board was formed, composed not only of administrators but of teachers, parents, and even select students, ensuring that no complaint would vanish into administrative shadows again. The culture shift rippled through every corridor, every lecture hall, every locked faculty office that once hid whispered compromises. Emily Carter, once the embattled teacher at the center of the storm, was offered job offers from prestigious schools across the country. Ivy League institutions, private academies, and national media outlets sought her expertise, her resilience having turned her into a reluctant symbol of integrity in education. But Emily chose to stay. "This is where the real work needs to be done," she told Sarah Nguyen over coffee in the faculty lounge. "If I leave, nothing changes." Sarah smiled, her eyes reflecting both admiration and relief. "You've given all of us courage." In the classroom, Emily's advanced chemistry courses flourished. Students who once navigated Crestwood with inherited arrogance now approached their studies with genuine effort, aware that shortcuts no longer existed. The grading curve that had once been subtly manipulated for the powerful dissolved into true meritocracy. Students who earned their grades now did so through mastery, not manipulation. In one corner of her lab, Maria Santos sat quietly, her concentration unwavering as she prepared her experiment. Maria, the daughter of immigrant parents who worked night shifts cleaning corporate offices, embodied the new spirit rising within Crestwood. Emily watched her with quiet pride, knowing that Maria's recent acceptance into MIT on a full scholarship represented far more than personal triumph. "You taught me that the most important reaction is the one between courage and injustice," Maria had written in her college essay. "It always produces change." The community surrounding Crestwood also shifted. Some wealthy families withdrew their children, unable to stomach the loss of influence. But for every family that departed in protest, 2 more applied, drawn by the school's newfound reputation for integrity. For the first time in its storied history, Crestwood was ranked not by the depth of its donors' pockets, but by the strength of its academic achievements. But while Crestwood healed, the shadows of the past lingered elsewhere. Ryan Caldwell served 2 years of his 5-year sentence before being released early for good behavior. He vanished into obscurity, leaving Connecticut behind entirely. Rumors whispered of him working construction under an assumed name in Montana, a ghost of the entitled youth who once ruled Crestwood's hallways. Ethan Zhao completed his sentence and disappeared from public view, his family quietly relocating overseas. Dylan Parker, whose cooperation had been pivotal, served his probation by tutoring underprivileged children, an ironic penance that forced him to confront the very inequality he once exploited. Senator Caldwell's political empire collapsed entirely. His wife's social standing evaporated as rapidly as the party invitations stopped arriving. Their estate was sold, the grand halls and sprawling gardens auctioned off to cover mounting legal debts and civil settlements. But Emily's journey did not end at Crestwood. 5 years after the assault that had altered the trajectory of her life, Emily stood in the rotunda of the United States Capitol, her image broadcast on monitors throughout the packed congressional hearing room. Before her sat the House Education Committee, gathered to consider the National Teacher Protection Act. Her voice, steady and clear, carried through the chamber. No teacher should have to choose between their safety and their students' education. When we protect teachers, we protect the future of our nation. She detailed her experience at Crestwood, the failures of administrative cowardice, the weaponization of privilege, and the necessity of equipping teachers with both legal protections and tools like body cameras to ensure accountability. Her testimony cut through partisan divides like a blade, and within months, the legislation passed with rare bipartisan support. Federal funding was allocated to provide legal resources and protective equipment for educators nationwide. As Emily stepped out of the Capitol into the crisp Washington air, news cameras flashed in rapid succession. She had not sought fame, but her refusal to back down had ignited a movement that now reshaped classrooms across the country. Back at Crestwood, the legacy of change continued to deepen. Emily was promoted to head of the science department, mentoring new teachers who arrived both nervous and inspired by her story. The school's science fair produced multiple national finalists, their achievements rooted not in family donations but in hours of genuine study and mentorship. The old corridors that once hummed with whispered threats now buzzed with earnest academic debate. Faculty who had once looked away found renewed purpose, emboldened by a culture that finally rewarded merit over manipulation. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the Connecticut hills, casting long amber streaks through her laboratory windows, Emily sat alone at her desk, grading papers. The body camera still rested beside her notebook, its blinking light no longer a symbol of fear but a quiet guardian of the integrity she had fought so hard to protect. Her phone vibrated softly. A message from Olivia Ramirez flashed on the screen. Another teacher in Texas just used body cam footage to expose harassment. She cited your case as inspiration. The revolution is spreading. Emily smiled softly, her gaze drifting across the classroom where the periodic table reflected the fading light like polished armor. Outside, the world continued to spin with its scandals and distractions, but within the walls of Crestwood Academy, the true story lived on in every student who raised their hand, every teacher who held their ground, and every lesson that proved integrity was the most potent catalyst of all. Tomorrow she would teach again. Tomorrow she would continue to stand watch. Tomorrow, like every day before, she would hold the line. The echoes of transformation at Crestwood Academy continued to ripple outward long after the headlines faded, but as Emily Carter knew too well, the battle for integrity never truly ended. The academy had become a beacon of change, its marble corridors now serving as silent witnesses to a new era where accountability reigned. Yet outside its gates, power structures built on generations of influence still stirred beneath polished surfaces, waiting for any chance to reclaim what had been lost. Emily's days unfolded with methodical precision. She arrived each morning before sunrise, the cool air heavy with mist as it coiled around the towering oaks lining the academy's private drive. The main building loomed ahead, its Gothic spires piercing the pale dawn sky. The once intimidating structure now radiated a quiet dignity, no longer a fortress for the privileged few but a sanctuary for those who sought knowledge without compromise. Her footsteps echoed across the polished marble floors as she made her way to her laboratory. The chemistry wing smelled of fresh cleaning agents and faint traces of past experiments, the sterile scent oddly comforting. Rows of meticulously arranged lab stations stood ready for the day's lessons, their surfaces gleaming beneath bright overhead lights. The body camera clipped to her lanyard blinked softly, a silent observer that had long since become part of her daily uniform. In the years since the trial, Emily had built an unshakable reputation among both students and faculty. She was no longer the embattled teacher fighting for survival, but the unwavering anchor of Crestwood's academic integrity. Students entered her classroom with genuine purpose, their notebooks filled with carefully handwritten notes instead of shortcuts whispered in dark corners. One morning, as she prepared a complex demonstration on covalent bonding, a soft knock interrupted her concentration. She turned to see Sarah Nguyen standing at the doorway, her expression a mixture of excitement and caution. "You need to see this," Sarah whispered, holding out her tablet. Emily took it, her eyes scanning the headline, "Former Senator Caldwell under federal investigation for financial crimes." The article detailed years of undisclosed offshore accounts, campaign finance violations, and backroom dealings that reached far beyond his son's trial. Emily exhaled slowly. The empire was finally crumbling. The senator's once unshakable influence had deteriorated into a public disgrace. He was now the subject of grand jury investigations that threatened to strip him of the last remnants of his power. Emily handed the tablet back, her face unreadable. "Justice moves slowly," she said quietly. "But it moves." Sarah nodded, her voice tinged with admiration. "You started a chain reaction." Emily returned her focus to the day's experiment, carefully measuring chemicals as her students filed in. The soft murmur of greetings filled the room, a comforting symphony of genuine curiosity and youthful energy. The new generation of Crestwood students carried no trace of the entitled arrogance that once defined its elite corridors. Among them, Maria Santos now served as both inspiration and proof of the academy's transformation. Home for the summer after completing her first year at MIT, Maria often visited the campus, mentoring younger students and assisting in advanced labs. Her quiet confidence filled the room as she guided a pair of freshmen through complex procedures, her hands steady, her explanations precise. Emily watched with quiet pride, seeing in Maria the embodiment of everything she had fought for. After class, Maria lingered, her voice soft but determined. "They asked me to speak at the State Educators Conference," she said. "They want me to share my story." "You should," Emily replied. "Your story matters." Maria hesitated for a moment. "They keep calling you a hero, Miss Carter. But you never wanted that," Emily smiled faintly. "I didn't fight for recognition. I fought so you could have a fair chance." Maria's eyes shone as she nodded. "And because you did, I'm here." That evening, as twilight painted the Connecticut hills in deep amber and violet, Emily remained at her desk long after the halls emptied. The rhythmic hum of the air conditioning was broken only by the soft scratch of her pen as she graded papers beneath the steady glow of her desk lamp. Outside her window, the vast campus grounds stretched silently beneath a sky peppered with the first stars of night. Her phone vibrated once more, another message from Olivia Ramirez. The teacher in Texas won her case today. The body cam footage made the difference again. Emily read the words slowly, feeling the steady pulse of change spreading far beyond Crestwood's borders. Each case, each victory, each stand against corruption became another crack in the walls that had once seemed impenetrable. But even as progress marched forward, shadows still lingered. She received occasional anonymous letters, thinly veiled threats warning her to stay in her lane. A few families who had once controlled Crestwood from behind closed doors continued to push back against the reforms, filing frivolous lawsuits, lobbying quietly to influence new policies. But they were no longer untouchable. Every accusation now faced public scrutiny, every action weighed against the precedent set by Emily's unwavering defiance. One rainy afternoon, as storm clouds gathered over the academy's stone rooftops, an unexpected visitor arrived. Richard Sterling, the same attorney who once tried to bribe her into silence, stood at the edge of the administrative building's lobby, his expensive umbrella dripping onto the marble floor. Emily approached him with measured steps, her posture unflinching. "You have no business here," she said calmly. Sterling offered a practiced smile, though his eyes betrayed the weariness of a man who had watched his clients fall one by one. "I came to offer congratulations," he said. "You won, Miss Carter. Against all odds." Emily's voice was steady. "I didn't win. The truth did." Sterling chuckled humorlessly. "Semantics. But enjoy your victory while it lasts. The higher you rise, the harder the fall." Emily stepped closer, her voice dropping to a cold whisper. "I'm not afraid of falling, Mr. Sterling. I'm afraid of teachers like me staying silent. That's how your clients thrived for so long. Those days are over." Sterling's smile faded entirely as he turned and left, his expensive shoes clicking sharply against the marble as the lobby doors hissed shut behind him. As the months passed, Crestwood's reputation grew stronger. Families who once sought shortcuts now respected the rigorous standards imposed. Enrollment applications soared, not because of generational wealth, but because parents recognized the value of true education built on merit. National academic rankings placed Crestwood among the highest in the country, not for its fundraising galas but for its student achievements. The science department, under Emily's leadership, produced a string of Intel Science Fair winners and national scholarship recipients. The walls of the once tainted administration building now displayed plaques honoring students for innovation, not legacy. Faculty meetings shifted from whispered grievances to open discussions about curriculum improvements and student mentorship. A culture of collaboration flourished, replacing the climate of fear that once silenced so many voices. On the first anniversary of the trial verdict, Emily arrived to find a handwritten note resting on her desk. It was signed by dozens of students, parents, and faculty. "Thank you for standing up for what is right," it read. You taught us all that integrity is worth protecting." She read the message slowly, her throat tightening, the words resonating with years of struggle condensed into one simple truth. That evening, after another long day of teaching and mentoring, Emily once again found herself alone in her laboratory as the sun dipped below the horizon. The shadows stretched across the polished countertops, wrapping the room in soft gold and indigo as the last light faded. She reached for her body camera, gently unclipping it and placing it beside her graded papers. Its small blinking light reflected softly off the glass beakers arranged in perfect rows. The camera no longer felt like armor, but like a quiet partner, a tool that had allowed the truth to finally have its voice. Beyond the classroom, beyond the courtroom, beyond the headlines and public battles, Emily knew her greatest victory was not found in the spotlight but in the quiet dignity of every student who now walked Crestwood's halls without fear. She stood, turned off the lights, and stepped into the corridor. The hallways, once filled with whispered threats and entitled sneers, now resonated only with the faint echoes of footsteps, laughter, and learning. The revolution she sparked no longer required her to shout. Its pulse lived on in the very bricks of the academy, and tomorrow, as always, she would teach again. The seasons shifted again at Crestwood Academy, ushering in another autumn draped in gold and crimson as the towering oaks shed their leaves across the cobblestone walkways. The air carried a quiet crispness that hinted at the cold months approaching, but within the walls of the academy, the atmosphere pulsed with new energy. Emily Carter stood at the entrance of the science wing, her breath forming delicate white clouds that dissolved quickly under the morning sun. She paused for a moment, watching students file through the grand archways, their chatter soft but purposeful. The entitlement that once poisoned these halls had thinned like dissipating smoke, replaced by the simple weight of earned ambition. In her laboratory, sunlight sliced through the tall windows, falling in sharp beams across polished lab tables. Rows of meticulously cleaned beakers reflected the light, each one perfectly aligned like disciplined soldiers awaiting instruction. The faint scent of disinfectant mixed with the subtle metallic notes of the chemistry equipment, filling the space with a sterile precision that comforted her. The body camera clipped to her lanyard blinked steadily, a quiet observer bearing witness to every moment. It had become a symbol not only of protection but of principle. The morning classes flowed smoothly. Students listened attentively as Emily guided them through the complexities of chemical reactions, her voice clear and measured as formulas and equations danced across the whiteboard. Their questions were thoughtful, their engagement sincere, each one a small testament to the culture that had taken root since the trial. During her lunch break, Emily met with Dr. Carmen Hughes in the new faculty lounge, a bright open space with large windows overlooking the manicured courtyard. Carmen handed her a folder, her eyes sharp with the weight of its contents. "They finally filed the indictments against the Caldwell business interests," she said. "Financial crimes, tax evasion, wire fraud." Emily flipped through the documents, each page adding another layer to the collapse of the once untouchable dynasty. The justice system had moved slowly, but its hands had not wavered. Carmen leaned forward, her voice low. "You realize what you started here has changed more than this school. It's rippling across the entire educational system." Emily nodded. It was never about just one school. It was about ending the silence. The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Maria Santos stepped inside, carrying a stack of research papers. She had returned from MIT for winter break, now serving as a part-time research assistant under Emily's mentorship. Her presence in the room radiated calm confidence. "Dr. Hughes, Miss Carter," she greeted. "The grant proposal was approved. We secured full funding for the new STEM outreach program." Carmen smiled warmly. "That's excellent news. We'll reach hundreds of students who never dreamed they could step foot inside Crestwood." Emily glanced at Maria, her voice filled with quiet pride. "You're becoming the mentor now." Maria's smile widened. "I learned from the best." The meeting concluded, and Emily returned to her classroom, her heels clicking rhythmically against the polished floors. As she passed through the corridors, students and faculty nodded in silent respect, their gazes carrying none of the fear or calculation that once ruled these halls. The institution had been reshaped, but the vigilance remained constant. That evening, after the last bell echoed through the emptying corridors, Emily remained at her desk, her lamp casting a warm circle of light over stacks of graded exams. Outside her tall windows, the campus glowed softly beneath rows of ornate street lamps, their amber halos shimmering against the darkness. The soft buzz of her phone drew her attention. Another message from Olivia Ramirez appeared on the screen. New legislation passed in California today. Mandatory teacher body cams statewide. Your testimony was cited in the final vote. Emily read the message slowly, allowing the weight of it to settle like fresh snow. The revolution was no longer contained within Crestwood's ivy-covered walls. It was growing, spreading across states, rewriting policies, giving teachers across the country the courage and tools to stand against the unchecked forces that had once silenced them. The next morning arrived with a heavy fog curling around the academy's spires, muffling the world beyond its iron gates. Emily's first class of the day was unusually quiet. As she began the lecture, a soft knock interrupted. Sarah Wynne stepped inside, her expression serious. "The governor's office just called. They want you to attend the National Education Summit. You're being recognized for your role in the reform movement." Emily exhaled softly, her voice steady. "Tell them, I'll attend." Sarah smiled. "The whole country's watching now." The summit took place inside a towering glass convention center in Washington, D.C., where education leaders, lawmakers, and national media gathered beneath banners emblazoned with phrases like restoring integrity to education and protecting those who protect students. Emily stood beneath the bright stage lights, the applause rising like a distant tide as she approached the podium. Her simple navy dress reflected none of the extravagance surrounding her. Instead, her presence commanded attention through the quiet strength in her voice. When we protect educators, we protect truth. When we protect truth, we protect the future. Her words cut through the cavernous hall, landing with sharp precision as cameras captured every syllable for national broadcast. She spoke of Crestwood, of Ryan Caldwell, of Maria Santos. She described how unchecked privilege had threatened to dismantle not just her career but the integrity of the system itself. And she spoke of how persistent courage had begun to dismantle the rot. As she finished, the applause swelled into a standing ovation that echoed through the vast chamber. Cameras flashed, journalists scribbled notes, lawmakers nodded. But beneath it all, Emily felt no sense of personal victory. She saw instead the countless teachers watching from their own classrooms, many of whom now wore the same small blinking cameras that had once made her an outlier. The summit marked another milestone in the growing national reform movement. States passed new protections. Unions negotiated stronger contracts. Administrative codes were rewritten to include mandatory transparency protocols. But with each victory came new challenges. Lobbyists funded by powerful private interests pushed back, arguing against regulations that threatened their influence. Wealthy donors sought to bend legislation quietly behind closed doors. Threats became more sophisticated, more subtle, less overt but no less dangerous. Back at Crestwood, Emily remained vigilant. Though the worst was behind them, she knew the allure of privilege never vanished entirely. It simply waited for new opportunities to creep back in. Each semester brought a new generation of students, each one carrying their own stories, ambitions, and occasionally the lingering entitlement passed down from families still clinging to old power structures. But unlike before, these forces now encountered resistance. The faculty stood united. The administration enforced policies without hesitation. Students knew that cheating, harassment, and manipulation would not find safe harbor within Crestwood's walls. One late winter evening, Emily once again sat alone in her laboratory, the rhythmic scratching of her pen marking corrections across a stack of essays. The soft hum of the building's heating system filled the air, blending with the distant whistle of wind outside the tall windows. The glass panes vibrated faintly under the occasional gust, as though the building itself remained alert. Her phone buzzed softly beside her notebook. A message from Maria flashed across the screen. "Just finished my first presentation at MIT. Quoted you. Courage plus integrity always equals change." Emily smiled, her eyes misting briefly. She leaned back, allowing the quiet of the laboratory to envelop her once more. Outside, the campus lights flickered gently beneath falling snow, each flake illuminated like tiny sparks suspended in the night air. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The work was never finished. But for tonight, Emily allowed herself a moment of stillness, surrounded by the quiet evidence of how far they had come. 5 years after the storm that redefined Crestwood Academy, the campus stood taller than ever beneath the pale blue sky of early spring. The ivy climbed higher along the stone walls. The marble floors gleamed under the warm afternoon sun, streaming through towering windows. The old-world beauty remained, but the air was different now. It carried the pulse of transformation, the quiet hum of a place no longer beholden to its past sins. Emily Carter walked the familiar corridors with steady purpose. Her heels struck the polished floor rhythmically, each step echoing softly beneath the vaulted ceilings. The students who crossed her path offered respectful nods. Many of them had heard her story long before setting foot on campus. She had become more than just a teacher. She was the embodiment of the academy's rebirth. In her classroom, sunlight poured through the tall windows, casting golden bands across rows of pristine lab tables. The glassware sparkled under the light, each beaker and flask standing in perfect alignment, prepared for the next generation of experiments. The periodic table on the far wall had been replaced with a new edition, updated and laminated, symbolizing the school's commitment to constant evolution. The body camera still clipped to her lanyard blinked its steady red light. Not out of fear, but out of habit. The camera had never needed to capture another moment of conflict, yet its presence remained a silent guardian of the integrity she had fought to establish. As she finished setting up the materials for the day's lesson, a soft knock came from the open doorway. Maria Santos stepped inside, her eyes bright, her knit hoodie loose over her small frame. She crossed the room with easy familiarity, her confidence unmistakable. "I got the email," Maria said, unable to suppress her grin. "Full funding approved for the National STEM Mentorship Program. We're launching in 10 states next year." Emily smiled, her voice warm. "You earned it. You built it." Maria's gaze softened. "Only because you showed me it was possible." Emily's eyes glistened briefly before she glanced down at the beaker in her hand, steadying herself. Maria had become one of many success stories that flourished in the soil of Crestwood's new era. The academy no longer served as a playground for the privileged few. It had become a proving ground for those who carried ambition fueled by substance, not surnames. Outside, the courtyard buzzed with controlled energy as parents and alumni arrived for the school's annual Founders' Day celebration. Once an event dominated by silent deals and private influence, it had evolved into a genuine showcase of student achievement. Booths displayed science projects, art installations, and community service initiatives. Faculty mingled openly with families, their conversations focused on innovation, not legacy donations. Near the main stage, banners fluttered gently in the breeze. One read, "Crestwood Academy, Honor Through Integrity." As the ceremony commenced, Carmen Hughes took the podium, her voice clear as she addressed the assembled crowd. "Today we celebrate not only our history but the choices that secured our future. We honor every student who earned their place, every teacher who held the line, and every family who embraced the standard we now uphold." The applause was genuine and sustained. Emily watched quietly from the side, allowing the moment to belong to the community they had rebuilt together. Her eyes scanned the faces in the crowd. She recognized many of the parents, not as political donors but as active partners in the school's mission. The toxic entitlement that once ruled these grounds had withered under relentless accountability. As the ceremony concluded, several parents approached her, offering firm handshakes and quiet words of thanks. One mother, her voice emotional, said softly, "My daughter never feared asking questions in class because of what you built here." "Thank you," Emily nodded, offering a simple reply. "That's why we're here." As dusk settled, painting the horizon in deep shades of amber and indigo, Emily returned to her office overlooking the central courtyard. The campus lights flickered on, casting warm pools of light across the manicured lawns. In the distance, students laughed as they packed up their displays, their voices bright under the clear night sky. She sat at her desk, the surface meticulously organized. Her body camera rested beside her lesson plans, its lens reflecting the soft lamplight. She reached for her notebook, adding final notes for the following day's advanced lab demonstration. The quiet was interrupted by the soft buzz of her phone. Another message from Olivia Ramirez appeared on the screen. The Federal Education Council voted. The National Teacher Protection Act has been expanded. Full funding approved. 50 states. Every district. Every school. Emily exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the moment wash over her. What had begun as one battle inside one hallway had grown into a movement that now reached classrooms from coast to coast. She typed a simple reply. "Thank you for believing in this." As she set the phone down, her eyes drifted to a framed photo on her bookshelf. It was a group shot taken at last year's National Education Summit. She stood at the center, flanked by teachers who had once feared speaking out, now leading reform movements of their own. In the photo, Maria stood beside her, smiling confidently. The movement was no longer fragile. It lived inside each of them. Beyond Crestwood, the world continued its relentless pace. New scandals surfaced. New headlines fought for attention. But inside these walls, the culture held strong. Every semester brought new students who entered not because of their last names but because of their passion for learning. The faculty remained vigilant. The administration remained steadfast. The lessons remained pure. One final knock sounded at the door. Sarah Newen entered, carrying a folder. "The governor's office confirmed your next speaking engagement," she said with a soft smile. "Keynote at the Global Education Reform Conference. They want you to open the summit." Emily paused for a moment, letting the words settle. Then she stood, her voice calm and certain. "Let's continue the work." Together, they stepped out into the quiet corridor. The hallway lights illuminated the path ahead, their glow steady and constant. The revolution that began in one broken laboratory, fueled by courage and recorded by a tiny blinking camera, had become a beacon that lit classrooms far beyond Crestwood's ancient walls. As Emily walked through the silent halls, she knew the fight would never fully end. Power would always seek to bend integrity. Influence would always try to corrupt truth. But as long as teachers stood firm, armed with courage and protected by accountability, the line would hold. And so, as another chapter closed and a new one quietly prepared to open, Emily Carter walked forward, not as a symbol but as a teacher, exactly as she always intended.